Welcome to Wired to Hunt's Rut Fresh Radio, bringing you the latest reports from the Whitetail Woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. And now, your hosts, KC Smith and Tyler Jones.
This is Rut Fresh Radio, y'all. I'm your host, KC Smith, and you probably noticed, but a cold front rolled through last week. It was awesome. A lot of big deer went down, and there's a lot of positive reports. However, acorns or acorns, depending on where you're at in the country, are starting to fall. Does it have a positive or negative impact on your hunt? This is Rut Fresh. Let's go. Welcome to Rut Fresh Radio, everyone, brought to you by First Light Gear. I'm your host, KC Smith. Tyler Jones is in the building, and Mark Kenyon is on the phone. Apparently, the boss is here. We're not sure which one that is.
Well, you said the king is in the building, I said that earlier, and you just said I'm in the building, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, a number of whitetail bucks have gone down so far this year.
Yeah.
Congrats to all who have participated in said thing. One of these people on the phone right now, or on the podcast, has shot more whitetail bucks than the other two. So doing what we do, I think that would kind of point to kingship, wouldn't it? How does it work exactly? Mark, weigh in.
So I'm totally lost right now.
I'm not surprised at all.
But I feel like this is like when you've got a get together with like all your friends, and your friends all have kids, and then if the kids are of a certain age, they can go all play in the other room. Mm-hmm. And so you mostly just let the kids play on their own in the other room. But every once in a while, you realize like, oh, it's weirdly quiet over there. I need to go and peek my head in. Mm-hmm. That's what I've been doing with Wired to Hunt's Rut Fresh Radio. I let the kids go play in the room for a while, but this week I was like, I need to get my head back here and see what the heck Tyler and Casey are doing. And now that I've done that, I realized that I had ample cause to be concerned.
Have you ever peeked your head in the door and then realized one of those kids is big, and then they wedge your head in between the door and the door frame with the door and smash it a few times?
That's yet to happen.
Okay.
But,
just know that it's within the realm of possibility, Mark.
Hopefully that's not in the cards. But I think what you're trying to say is that Tyler's killed more deer than me this year. Therefore, he should be the king of Wired Hunt. Is that what I'm trying to say?
I don't think he really wants that position, but
no.
You can maintain it, Mark. We'll let you have it. But lots of good things have been going on. Once we make it past our
I'm still lost
middle school banner. But you've been doing some hunting, huh, Mark? Apparently a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what these shows are supposed to be about, right?
Sometimes.
Reports from the field.
Yeah.
I've been out 7 of the last 8 days here in Michigan. And have been seeing a lot, have been hunting myself, and then also mentoring a couple new hunters for 4 of those days. So yes, I've had some interesting observations. I can share whatever you want me to share.
I want to know how your mentored hunters did.
Well, we had a fun hunt. Unfortunately, nobody killed a deer. They were trying to kill their first deer with a bow, both of them. So didn't actually fill a tag, but they both had their closest call ever with a deer. So they both, I think had a really cool experience. They both learned a lot, and both came
from you, or just from being in the woods.
Hopefully, a little bit of both.
Good. No, we're poking fun, but I bet they were very appreciative to have you in the woods. If nothing else, you spend a lot of time in the woods, right? And are these kind of newer hunters?
Yeah. So these are 2 guys who were brand new hunters 2 years ago, and I was actually with both of them when they killed their very first deer ever. This was a field to fork program that we host over on the back 40. And so I got to mentor both of them separately back in 21. Both killed the first deer with a gun. And then the year and a half or 2 years since, I've continued to stay in touch with them and try to help them on their journey. And we went out together again last year. And then this year we came back to the back 40, and I was hopefully going to give them that final training opportunity and was hoping we could get their first deer with a bow now that they've started bow hunting. But didn't quite come together, but man, it was close. It's about as close as you can get.
That's cool. Well, and if you're listening and you don't know what the Bag 40 is, there was a series on Meat Eater that we'll link to in the show description that kind of chronicled a little bit of the land stuff there on the Bag 40 for 2 years, I think. Right, Mark?
Yeah, 2 years.
And then now since then, that property is being used for a lot of hunts like what you're referring to. So pretty cool deal. I actually saw in your story that y'all were out there on the Bag 40. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I kind of put it together. I should have kind of remembered that. But, when you said that, I was like, that's pretty, and apparently looking pretty nice out there, huh?
Yeah, it really is. The habitat is looking great. That transformation that we started back like 5 years ago has been continued now by the National Deer Association. So the volunteers have been doing a great job. It looks awesome. I mean, it looks like a deer and wildlife paradise. Now, what's interesting, and I'll just kind of jump right in here with a little bit of an observation for you guys that might be useful for other people. We had all sorts of beautiful, secluded green food plots tucked in the middle of switchgrass. Like this, the whole farm is now like really thick prairie and switchgrass, like incredible cover everywhere. There's nothing that's not great cover now, except for these tucked away food plots, which are then tight next to timber bedding too. So, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better early season setup. And there's, as far as we know, has not been anyone in there in 3 weeks. But despite that, almost nothing was keying in on the green food plots. Like we saw very, very, very little deer activity on the food plots. And the little bit that we did see was very, very late, like the last couple minutes of daylight. What we did see, there's one camera that the NDA has out there, and that camera was on a red oak tree, and there were deer hammering the red oak acorns. And so that was kind of interesting to see that they're really keyed in on those acorns. And that's something that I've seen on my other spots that I personally hunt. I've got cameras on a couple spots like that, and I can observe a couple spots like that. And same thing, like my cameras that are on green plots, not a whole lot of activity. Spots with acorns, a lot of deer. So that's not a huge surprise, right? At this time of year, that's pretty common, but it's very exaggerated, I feel like, right now. I think most people that you guys have talked to over the last couple of weeks and that I have all talked about the bumper crop of acorns across big parts of the country. And I think that's the case. Like there are a lot of acorns out there, and deer are really getting after them. So, that's been something that actually last night I tried to key in on that very thing. I said, all right, I've got plots I could hunt, but I'm going to dive into the timber right next to where my target buck lives. And there's an oak flat in there that historically there's been a lot of deer in. And I thought I'd give it a swing in there and count on him keying in on those acorns. I'd actually seen 2 semi-mature bucks doing that on the second day of the hunting season here in Michigan. From afar, I could see them working the edge of these oaks. So that's something I've been trying to do myself.
So you've been hunting quite a bit, which I didn't know that you still had that passion as much as you trout fish. What have you been seeing besides that, as far as actual like bucks? What's the report there in Michigan?
Well, a lot of buck activity, despite, last week around this time, you had that hot weather across a lot of the country. And I took a couple hunts on those hot days in sort of observation type sets and ended up still seeing, good activity. I can't remember if we talked, I wasn't on last week's episode, but the night before the opener in Michigan, I observed my target buck moving in daylight when I was glassing from a hilltop, probably 45 minutes before dark. And then 2 days later, like I mentioned, I was out again in an observation stand, safer location because of that hot weather, but still in the game kind of set. And saw a 3-year-old and a 3, maybe 4-year-old buck, both moving that last half hour around the oaks. And then on the back 40 hunt, I was just talking about, late movement despite that cold front. I was surprised by that with this front that just moved through, over the weekend. Lots and lots of big deer getting shot all over the place. So I thought, in this terrific habitat in the back 40, we'd be seeing a lot of early movement. and it just didn't happen for us. But what I don't know, to what I just said, is like, were they all in the timber on Acorns? We don't have big timber and a bunch of Acorns in the back 40. So that could have been happening elsewhere. But we did see a mature buck 2 nights in a row. One of the guys had it come across in front of him at 36 yards and it was just too long of a shot for him to feel comfortable. So he did see, a good buck moving in daylight. And then our last night, we saw that same good buck the last 60 seconds of daylight cruising out of range. So that's a long-winded way of saying, both on the warm days and on the great cold weather days, I have been seeing decent bucks moving that last hour of daylight still. And one last thing in my long rambling observation here, I just told you this whole thing about how it seemed like the deer are keying on Acorns and not keying on the green, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give folks a little tease, a little update on my own personal saga story. So last night I'm thinking, I'm getting smart. I'm like, all right, forget these plots. They're keying on the Acorns. I'm going to go do that thing I just told you, right? Which is I'm going to punch into this transition area next to bedding where there should be Acorns. I'm going to hunt that spot. So I did that last night. Well, I get an update on my cell phone camera overnight. Well, I guess it would be, when would it have been?
You have that set on 24-hour update. Is that how you do it?
So it sends right now. This one sends at 9:15 at night. So I get it sent after dark, and then I get one sent at 4:15 in the morning. I have it set on twice, but it's both overnight. I'm not sure why. This particular camera did get updated on it.
That is kind of a random spread there.
Well, I take that back. That's not how it is. The reason I get the two is that they're different cameras. So I've got some cameras that give me an update at 9:15, and some cameras give me an update at 4:15. That's why this.
It's not because those are both good spotlighting times of the day. It has nothing to do with it. Okay, good. I didn't want you on Clay's podcast or anything.
But what I'm trying to get at here is last night I'm laying in bed and I get the pictures that showed everything that happened over the last 24 hours. And what it showed me is that while I was sitting in the Acorns, 190 yards away, the Y9 was on my green food plot on the other side of the bedding area in daylight.
Dadgummit. Hey, yeah, that's cool. And I'm not. This is actually not me making fun of you. Are you saying green or grain when you say that?
Green.
Green. Okay, gotcha. My southern ears aren't too attuned to those little small.
Yeah, and those green plots have grains in them as well as other things. So the plots that I have been observing or have cameras on have been blends. All of them actually in the back 40 and the other spots I hunt have got some oats, some wheat, some clover, some brassicas, stuff like that.
I hunted brassicas on a piece of public, one of those things that the state plants a couple days ago. Mark, I know 7 of 8 is a better ratio than 14 of 16, but I'm on 14 of 16 right now, so, I too have done a large amount of hunting. I don't know if that means anything to you, but
that's pretty good.
I'm tired. To tell you the truth of the matter, glad to be home. But, I hunted just pretty much strictly brassica plot. It looked like purple tops and icicle radish or daikon, whatever you want to call them, and the deer were hammering those things. So that's why I was interested to hear that you were seeing, a little bit of a lack of movement on that stuff. But I was in an area that has no oak trees to speak of, so I wonder if that has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think it probably does, but there's. Like so many things, there's always exceptions to the rule, and these things change so fast. As soon as I say Acorns, they go to green, and then I'll be saying, let's go to green, and then they'll be on Acorns or corn or who knows what. So, that's part of the fun of it, right? Is that you make the best guess and best prediction you can, but they keep you guessing.
Yeah. So you mentioned that buck that showed up with a minute left in light the other day. You said cruising. Did you mean rut cruising or just walking around getting ready to go somewhere to feed?
Yeah, sorry, not rut cruising. He was just moving on a mission. He was not feeding around. He was just on a steady gait, walking along this timber edge, and actually was walking along the edge of the switchgrass and the timber and then went into the timber. And had no interest in the food plot that was just 10 yards away from him.
Gotcha. Okay. So things can change pretty quickly right now. We've seen a lot of guys that are starting to find some success right now. We've had a lot of a lot of the country that's been in cold fronts and that kind of thing. And every day right now, the days are getting shorter. You are a pretty smart guy, and you mentioned something to me that made me feel really idiotic the other day. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I didn't mean. I wasn't planning on publicly shaming you.
No,
so.
I need it. I need it. It's the only way to stay humble, Mark.
Well, I listen every week of the Rut Fresh Radio podcast because this thing's great. I thoroughly enjoy the updates. And a couple different weeks, I heard you talking, to guys and big. So, is the moon impacting things? Is the weather impacting things? Is the diurnal period impacting things? And I heard that the first time, and I just thought, oh, he must have misspoke. And then I heard it again last week. I'm like, I think Tyler is confusing diurnal with photo period.
Yeah.
And so I texted you to ask if that was the case. And you're like, oh, yep. So what I think you've been referring to is photo period, which is the amount of day in a 24-hour period. And the photo period is basically the thing that is tied to the changes in testosterone levels in deer, which changes at a consistent rate throughout the year, every year at the same time, because that change in daylight is the same every year throughout the year. And so that is what leads to a generally consistent timing of peak breeding in most deer herds, outside of those funky places down south. So that's what photo period is, and I know what you were referring to.
Yeah. What's the diurnal
allegedly
period?
Let's say allegedly at the end of all that.
Allegedly.
Mark, it's funny. You love your constants, and it's good as a deer hunter to key in on that stuff. But it is those little weird things like that just make you go, why? If photo period does mean that much, right? Why are there these little side trips or whatever? But that's what makes it fun, because these things are not predictable.
Yep.
You just cannot just figure them out.
Yes,
yeah.
That is the truth.
Yeah. You had a question there too, Tyler. What was it?
I was just gonna see if you knew what the diurnal period was.
Well, I don't think diurnal period is a thing, Tyler. I think you made that up.
No, it's not.
Because diurnal. Nocturnal animals are animals that are most active at night.
Sure.
Diurnal describes an animal that's most active during the day.
Yes.
And crepuscular is in the middle. Is that right?
Crepuscular would be most active at the edges. So crepuscular would be animals like whitetails that have peak activity periods at the edges of daylight.
So diurnal, there's a diurnal cycle.
Yes. That is the thing.
Do you know what it is?
I think it's the fact that a diurnal cycle would be something that happens on a daily basis, a 24-hour type cycle.
Man,
is that
look
right?
at you. You're smart. You're a smart guy. I'm glad to know you, man.
Well,
You're just a walking thesaurus.
I'll take these accolades. I'm going to take these accolades when I can get them.
Yeah. Hey, I give them to you, man. We're glad to have you back on, man, and to just kind of share your story. And we're sure going to have you on several more times as much as we can. Things get really busy from this point on for all deer hunters and for you and us as well. So we'll try to make sure we stay in touch on this stuff and get updates from you from the field and that kind of thing going forward.
Yeah, man. Can I give you a prediction?
Oh, yeah, I would love that. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to say over the next 7 days, at least in the areas that I've been looking at in forecasts, we've got a pretty consistent weather pattern. It's kind of stagnating now for the next 2 weeks, at least is what I've seen in my neck of the woods. So we had that really hot weather. We got that first big cold front. I think we had a rush of activity. A lot of people killed deer over the last 3 or 4 days. I think it's going to stagnate a little bit with that weather. It's not going to be bad, but we're not going to get this huge burst of new deer activity. I think what we're going to see is a steady increase, right? As photo period would tell us, as that testosterone level rises over the next week, we're going to continue seeing a little bit more activity as those bucks are slowly edging towards getting that pre-rut action going. So with that being the case, I'm going to give you a standard Midwest 6 because
let's go.
I think it's going to be decent. I wouldn't expect things to be banging yet, but I think it'll be decent. And if you're on a deer, you certainly have an opportunity.
Man, y'all are on your way to being Canada. Oh man, that's a good prediction for sure. I'd probably agree with you. You know, like the same. I've seen our trail cameras. They're on 48-hour updates, but you know, just to one up you there. But they have shown a lot of increased movement in the last few days. But then I hunted last night locally, and we saw hogs, and that was it. We saw a couple of does briefly, but it was pretty much just that. And then I my 48-hour period ended this morning, so I saw on my trail cameras this morning that there was no deer movement overnight or this morning in daylight at all, which was weird because the last few days I've had deer movement over the last few days, quite like an increased amount or about the same, but more daylight, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just, I think you're spot on with that prediction that things are starting to level out and become the new norm. And we need something different to happen, I think.
Yep.
So, but with this cold front, you know, we had a lot of deer die across the country and a lot of hunters that were experiencing really good movement. So we're gonna get a few of those guys on the phone right now and chat with them and see if they have the same prediction.
Tyler, who do we got this week?
Well, this week we've got several guys from different places in the U.S. We've got Aaron Warbritton there in Iowa. He's been doing some hunting with some of his buddies that do the hunting public stuff. We got Clay Newcomb in Arkansas with a W at the end. Dakota Long, he's in Texas. He's a good friend of ours. And another good friend of ours, Drew Robbins, down in Alabama. These guys are going to give us reports that are going to hopefully pertain anywhere you're at in the U.S., except maybe the Northeast. Maybe we'll hook you up next week with that one. Now on the phone, I've got Aaron Warbritton from the Hunting Public. Aaron, you've been up in the Midwest hunting all over the place, Iowa namely. How's that been looking lately, man?
Real good since this cold front. We've had a little bit different scenario this year, which is not uncommon. Each year is a little bit different. I feel like, and you always have got to hunt situations based on whatever conditions you have in a given moment. But this time around, we were very, very dry going into the season. So hardly any water. All the intermittent creeks are dry. The only places that deer could get water, because, I mean, it's been, almost months without any sizable rain, has been ponds or permanent water like creeks or rivers. But all the intermittent streams are dry. And what we noticed, I mean, all the vegetation is dry even. There's not much moisture in it. And at this point in the year, the crops have dried down also. Deer are living real close to permanent water.
Gotcha.
That's been the big key that we found, even hunting in that real hot weather during the first week of season. It was like 90 degrees, and then it fell off and, dropped to 30 degrees in that recent cold front. And since that cold front, the buck sign is just ramped way up. Like they're lots of fresh rubs, lots and lots of fresh scrapes since that cold front came around.
So we were just driving home from South Dakota this past weekend, and there's a lot of harvest happened, which seems early to me. How has that drought affected the crops, and do you think they're pulling stuff out earlier than normal?
I think they are, but that's probably just based on the lack of rainfall. And the yields this year are poor in a lot of areas from the drought. But, yeah, we're seeing the same thing. Crops are coming out. For whatever reason, though, we've seen decent acorn crop. It depends on the area that you're at. I was at one area the other day, and there was gobs and gobs of white oak and red oak acorns on the ground, and deer were smoking them. And then I went 30 minutes down the road, and there was very few acorns in, a swath of timber that we worked through. So it's hit or miss, but there's definitely on acorns, and that's where we've been finding lots of buck sign and lots of fresh scrapes and stuff. Hadn't seen a lot of scraping activity until this recent front, but been really ramped up. Had a nice buck come by working scrapes just 2 nights ago.
So would you like, if you're looking into the next week, would you suggest checking scrapes out, maybe hanging cameras over them, or even hunting them on an afternoon that you get off?
Oh, for sure. I love hunting scrapes, especially during bow season. Mm-hmm. Just because it puts a deer on a spot, you can set up well with the, downwind of the scrape. In a lot of situations, you can wait for the deer to get there. You can, it gives you a really good high odds chance at killing a deer. You can put yourself within 20 yards of them. You can wait for the deer to get there and start working the scrapes. You can come to full draw and then wait for your opportunity. Mm-hmm. They don't work every time, obviously. If you're just walking along the edge of an ag field and you're finding 10, 15 fresh scrapes there, that's pretty good ways from any sort of secure bedding area. I wouldn't fool with those. I'd put cameras over those. But if you're finding scrapes back in the timber, on a secluded oak flat or something like that, especially close to permanent water this year, I would be looking at that pretty hard here in the next few days.
If you see a storm come through and you're in one of those dry areas right now that the deer are using that water heavily, does that knock them off those water patterns, you feel like? Are you more apt to go back to scrapes where they might be freshening stuff up, or what do you think?
Jury's still out on that one. I don't know. I'm kind of waiting for that to happen and see. Yeah. Because like I said at the beginning, every year's a little bit different. And I think just because it's been so dry for so long right now, there's very little like succulent green food sources other than natural browse, because that stuff's got deep roots and it pulls moisture from lower than a lot of, grasses or even food plot crops. So I don't know. I mean, everything is just so dry that we've noticed that's where all the deer are concentrated at, is anywhere close to permanent water. And when we're close to permanent water, we're finding a lot of scrapes and rubs, because that's obviously where the bucks are. I mean, we target those areas on a year when it's not dry, just because big bucks often will put themselves in a spot real close to permanent water as far as their bedding area choice will go. But that's especially evident this year when it's really, really dry, and they can't, because there's the moisture content in the browse that they're eating right now is so low that they've got to have some sort of permanent water source close by. I mean, we sat a pond the other day that was real close to a parking lot on public land that gets pounded, and I think Ted saw 8 or 9 deer.
Man, that sounds like a good hunt for early in the season, dude. I'm glad that y'all are already on them that hard. If you were looking forward to the next week, I need you, if you would, to rank what you expect the buck movement to be like on a scale of 1 to 10.
Oh, man, I don't know. Depends on where you're at.
Well, Southern Iowa, give me that one. That's what I need to know.
Well, it even depends on where you're at in the woods. Your situation, how tight are you to the bedding? But I would say overall it's going to be pretty good. If I had my choice, I'd be hunting cold fronts in October over any other time. Mm-hmm. So I would say 7 or 8, especially if we get a really good front here later part of this week.
Ooh, man, that's a pretty exciting time, man. It's 7 or 8 in Southern Iowa is about as good as it gets. So that's a good time to get out there, and I'm sure y'all will. Dude, I appreciate the report. Thanks.
No problem, man.
On the phone, I have got Meat Eater's own, Arkansas's native son, Clay Newcomb. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, KC. Doing just great.
That's good, man. Well, I know you've been doing a little whitetail hunting. In fact, we were talking mid-hunt this past week. We were both giving each other some, a little bit of encouragement. And I wanted to see how that went for you, man. How has the hunting been there in Arkansas?
Man, I have got a fresh load of not great news from the whitetail Newcomb world down here. I've not had a real great season so far. Just, man, hadn't been finding much buck sign, hadn't been getting pictures of many deer, which usually I am this time of year, getting pictures of deer over feed sometimes, getting pictures of deer over mock scrapes and different stuff. And I don't really understand it completely, but I have not I actually didn't even hunt much this last weekend because I just was a little just kind of waiting. I've got spots that I don't want to bombard too much until I'm pretty confident that there's a deer there that I want to kill and I can kill him. And so I spent this last weekend, which was an incredible cold front, October's first cold front. I know a lot of guys here that killed good deer this weekend, but I was not one of them. So, yeah.
That's it's tough, but I understand that the patient game is good. You and I were talking about some bear hunting you'd been doing up there, and you were targeting acorn ridges. Do you think that the acorns are having an impact on the whitetails where you're at as well?
Well, that's part of the deal. Is I've yet to really find big concentrations of acorns, and usually that's the bear story. If you can find the acorns, you can find the bears, but. I think some of the acorns are holding a little longer than they usually do. They're not falling, but also they're just not as many here in the places where I'm at. I've not found a lot of acorns.
We're kind of seeing the same thing, Clay, down here where we're at in East Texas. Now, as far as playing the slow game and being conservative, are you waiting on something in particular? Are you waiting on just stuff to show up on trail camera? Are you waiting on conditions or what?
Okay, so the specifics of my situation this year is I lost a big farm for me that I've had access to for 20 years, which has kind of locally allowed me. I didn't realize how good I had it until it was gone. And I lost 90% of my hunting ground, and I'd relied on it so much that I just didn't have a lot of other stuff built up. Now and also because I had this private, I have not invested a ton in local public land hunting. Okay. It's a complicated story, boys. But the 10% of the remaining private permissions that I have are small properties. So basically I woke up to this year and it's like I have a couple of very small properties that I'm hunting that I have had to be conservative in because they're so small. If that answers your question, Tyler.
Yeah.
So, and there's one good deer that I've got on camera. It's nothing fancy. I mean, like 125-inch deer probably, which I would hunt him like a Boone and Crockett, and I will. But I have just not really got him on pattern. I've got him on camera 2 or 3 times randomly, no pattern. And it's a small property, so it's not like I can go, well, I know where he's bedding, or I'm going to go over on this ridge and see if I can find him over there. It's kind of like he's either on my place or he's not, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
and so that's why I found myself being conservative. But losing the public has pushed me back to kind of my roots of local hunting, which is I did go on some public land. Now, it's a long story. I do hunt public land every year in Arkansas, a long ways from my house.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I'll say.
All right.
Like I travel and hunt public.
Yeah, I would say any public I hunt's way away from my house too. It's the way. It's definitely the thing to say. Nowhere near your home.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Looking at the weather, we the moon's kind of going away. It's going to be kind of low. I don't know if you think about that much, but we have fairly monotonous weather coming up for like even the 10-day forecast. There's a little bit of a front, I think, this weekend, but it's we're looking at a real similar stretch of days through here. With that being said, thinking about the acorn situation and what you have to hunt, what do you think the buck movement's going to be like on a scale of 1 to 10 over the next week?
Probably like a 5. I think the middle of October for where I'm at has never been great. It feels like to me, after about the 20th of October, anything could happen. I mean, you could have a buck on a doe that is, a doe in heat. It seems like, that and that causes bucks to be moving around a lot more. To me, the 20th of October here in Northwest Arkansas is the time to start getting serious and to start being less conservative in terms of like, now's the time to hunt your good stuff. The next 10 days, I mean, I'll hunt anytime that I get a chance, and anything could happen. I was just talking to some guys today that may not have been last year, may have been 2 years ago, but on October the 14th, they saw a giant buck locked down on a doe. I mean, like straight up, she was in heat. He was, I mean, you'd have thought it was November the 4th.
How about that?
And that was on October 14th. And I think feels like in this part of the world, we're seeing kind of these longer ruts. I don't know if that's anecdotal and not real, but it feels like anything could happen a little sooner. But I don't anticipate, if I was waiting for days to take off, I wouldn't take off.
Gotcha.
Until after the 20th of October.
Well, that's the quality information we need there, sir. Clay Newcomb of Arkansas Buck Truck fame, where we hunted together down in Arkansas with Clay on some public ground. Clay, we appreciate the insight, sir, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. Can't wait to see how your season unfolds.
Well, I've been enjoying seeing how y'all's has unfolded, and it's been good. So good job to y'all.
On the phone, I got to Dakota Long with Cotton Creek Outdoors. He's been doing some hunting down in Texas. What's up, dude?
Hey, KC, thanks for having me on.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome, man. You know, actually, from where we sit, you're up in Texas because you're a little further north than us. Not a whole lot, but I think that the general public doesn't realize how big the country of Texas is. It's a monster place. It's almost like we're neighbors and we're 3 hours apart. So, dude, I was scrolling social the other day, and I saw a big giant buck, and I saw a big old smile from you right behind him the other day. You shot you a big one, dude.
Yes, sir. Yeah, he was a really cool buck. Is my biggest deer to date, and it was pretty. I made a bad shot on him, but hey, that's part of bow hunting. Sometimes we recovered him though.
That's great, man. I'm glad you got him. So, what tactic were you using hunting that deer?
So, we're hunting over like gravity fed protein feeders out that way. So it's more of a feeding situation on our side, and then but the deer hadn't been hitting it as much. Everything's kind of starting to change, as you guys probably have seen with cameras and that kind of stuff. They're going to the woods that I've seen, or they've been hitting locust trees a lot, eating those beans, and they just been inconsistent on feeders. The bachelor groups are really starting to break up, from what I can tell. They're not. You'll still see bucks together. They're not really fighting. Some of the young bucks are kind of sparring, but they're really not consistent on the feed anymore. At least the mature deer aren't.
Yeah, so I actually saw a trail camera picture this morning of a deer eating a locust bean pod, which is interesting. You mentioned that. Do you guys have live oaks out there where you're at?
Yeah, there's a few. There's not a whole bunch, but there is some. Yes, sir.
Are they dropping, and are you seeing any deer hitting them?
Yeah, so the ones we've seen, actually the night I killed my buck, there were some younger deer that actually went over to, I guess it was a live oak, but it was kind of a low hanging one. And he stood up on his back feet and was shaking those limbs and getting those acorns to fall.
That's
and
cool.
They stood over there for 15 or 20 minutes before they ever came over and to the feeder.
What are the chances that he's browsing leaves off that thing too?
Yeah, there's a very good chance of it.
Yeah.
And at first I thought he was making a scrape, and I was like, no, he's not making a scrape. He's shaking that tree and getting acorns off of it.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that there are more deer that are eating off those acorn trees, off those live oaks, or around them, or there's more deer that are coming to protein feeders?
So I think it's a little mixture of both, because it's like every third day those mature deer will come back to the feeders, but they're staying in the timber. I mean, they don't have to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Has the cold front affected the deer movement?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. I've seen a lot more does on cameras, and they're really, I don't think they're packing up quite yet, but they're they're not as consistent as they were on their like summer feeding patterns. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you were looking forward, the weather for Texas, at least where we're at, is really monotone for like the next 10 days. Is that what you're kind of seeing as well, or do y'all have some fronts going out there a little further west?
Yeah, we got one front coming in. I think like Friday night is what it's looking like, and then by Monday it's going to be kind of back up in the 80s. So I think it's going to be may get a couple good days of some bucks like hitting, a food source, or it's going to and then I think it's going to kind of just mellow out, and you're going to be kind of seeing the same younger deer for a few days. And those, when it warms back up, I feel like those big bucks, they'll kind of, stay stagnant for a little bit.
Yeah. So with that looming, I suppose you got kind of like a little bit of a window there looking at the next week. If you had to rank what you thought buck movement would be like on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say it is for Texas for the next week?
I would give it a 7. I think you're going to still see some big bucks moving and a lot of younger bucks moving for sure.
How about that, man? That's a good. That makes me want to go get in the woods right now. Well, not right now, but this weekend. If you say that sounds all right to me.
I feel like we're going to get it's looking in the upper 40s in the like Friday night, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think that Saturday is really going to get the deer on their feet, and then and it'll kind of back off, as the beginning of next week starts. But I feel like it's really going to give them a good push, I hope.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for the report. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a good rest of the season, dude.
You bet. I appreciate y'all.
I got our friend Drew Robbins. He's been hunting in Alabama. What's going on, dude?
Man, not much, brother. Just trying to take advantage of this cold weather, this cooler weather that just moved in, and so we're been excited about that. And so hoping to get out a couple more times in the next couple weeks and try to get something else down on the ground.
That's cool, man. So, we are Southern brethren, and around here we call them cool fronts because it ain't really cold yet. Do you say that where you're at too?
Well, we call them cold fronts.
Good.
Just from, and so, but I mean, y'all are, Texas brethren over there, 80 from 90 to 85 is a cool front, man, for y'all.
15 degrees. Well, any way you look at it, So, have y'all been out getting after deer pretty good already?
Yeah. We've been out and just been keying in on some, just the traditional early season, acorns. And we had a really wet summer. And so in our neck of the woods, it seems like we have a really good bumper crop of acorns this year. And so that's what we've been keying in on. Guys that I know have been keying in on is that stuff right there.
So do you guys have like that kind of traditional American white oak, or you seeing a lot of different stuff dropping in your area?
Normally it's the white oaks that are early season, and then once you get a little bit later, the red oaks will start dropping. And so, but that's what we mostly key on is white oak. But that's also because that's the majority of the oaks around here.
Sure,
is that.
So are the deer using them right now? Pretty heavy.
Oh
yeah, you're seeing that.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. It's a double-edged sword in the sense of if you can find the one that they are about, then man, you have a really good chance of at least seeing deer, but also harvesting. But also, since we had such a wet summer, like I said, they don't have to travel very far, and so we have quite a few of the oaks up in our area, and so maybe in South Alabama and in South Georgia might not be as much. But we have a lot of oaks up here, and so they don't have to travel as much, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But like I said, if you can find that one, man, you're in the chips.
So we were talking to Mark Kenyon earlier, and he said that the acorns are affecting the movement they're seeing on like food plots and stuff. Have you noticed any of that? Are you seeing less movement on food plots? Are they still hitting the green fields and stuff like that?
Yeah, they're hitting the green fields just a little bit. I actually sat over a greenfield opening day, or opening afternoon, I should say, and I killed a doe, but it's not near as what it was as compared to last year. Just for example, I got a couple cameras on some food plots that I lease and have permission on. And man, we were getting slammed last year with does, and this year it's not nearly as much. And so, because they're on the oaks hard right now.
So, being down in the southern part of the U.S., you have a later rut, I'm assuming, at least in part of your state. Does that mean that the technical early season patterns last longer as well?
Correct. Yeah, we're seeing down here, and I mean, the early season pattern could last into 1st of November, but it's also unique here because we also have rut activity around that time as well, and so. But really, once you get that first real good frost, and I'm talking about like real good one, that's kind of when, and at least what I've seen, the early season patterns really start to dissipate, and then they start to spar a little bit and start to kind of fill their oats some. And so we had a nice cold front move in this past weekend and dropped it down, and it was in the low 40s. But traditionally, it'll get back hot again or warmer, and then we'll have another real good one in the 1st of November, and that's when we really see them start to break up and really start to spar a little bit and lay down a lot more buck sign is when we get that first good frost.
Gotcha. So in the next week, thinking about variables that could deal with weather or the photo period, or maybe even food sources changing or whatever it might be, maybe the moon. What do you predict the buck movement to be like on a scale of 1 to 10 in the next week or so?
1 to 10, I would probably say a 5. Just middle there of the road, just coming off what I would call probably like a 7, of the past week. It's going to warm up some. Also, it's weird because the reason that they're also not hitting food plots is a lot of guys don't have food plots down on the ground yet because we haven't had a whole lot of rain once the calendar hit September. So we got a ton during the summer, and then once it hit September, which I know for some of the southern states that's the openers. We didn't get a whole lot of rain here in Alabama, so that's another reason we're not seeing a whole lot of activity on greenfield. So I would say, man, just an average 5, just average hunt week.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for the report, man. I look forward to seeing what you put down on the ground this year, and hopefully we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks, fellas.
See you.
After listening to these guys, I am pumped to go deer hunting. Man, it's here, guys.
Power.
It is dadgum deer season, as we like to say around here. You can get out there and chase them around with a bow about near anywhere in the country now. So it's an exciting time to be a hunter. It's an exciting time, a good time to be alive. There's a great country and western song by Travis Tritt that had a lot to do with that at one point in time. Might be what we need to listen to on the way to the stand next time. If you need to feel inspired, and you've done listening to Travis, but you want to maybe watch something, you need to go check out the latest and greatest episode of Buck Truck. It's from Texas, our very own home state. There was a Texas report here. And Mark Kenyon, who also was in the intro today, was on that hunt as well. Mark elects to make a decision on a buck in that video. You need to go watch it and see if it was the right or wrong decision. Let us know what you think on that. Also, the last episode of 1 Week in November should be live on the Meat Eater channel as well. So go check that out if you haven't. And that's what I know, guys. It's Rut Fresh. It is time to get out and hunt some deer. This has been Rut Fresh. Keep it fresh.